The first thing Adrian Cross learned after pretending to be in a coma was that silence makes people honest, because when the world believes you cannot hear, they stop performing and start revealing who they truly are. And for a man like Adrian Cross, a self-made millionaire who built an empire from nothing, survived hostile takeovers, public scandals, and private betrayals, truth had become the rarest currency of all. Officially, Adrian Cross no longer existed, at least not in the way the world knew him, because after a carefully staged late-night car crash on a rain-soaked highway, he was admitted to a private hospital under a false identity, listed as an unresponsive coma patient with no visitors, no family, no past, just a body attached to machines and a steady rhythm of beeps that marked time in a way boardrooms never did. The doctors believed the scans, the nurses followed protocol, and the world moved on, unaware that behind closed eyelids Adrian's mind was awake, sharp, and listening, because the coma was a lie, a final experiment born from exhaustion, distrust, and a lifetime of wondering whether anyone would care about him if the money disappeared and the power meant nothing. In his real life, people smiled because they wanted something, laughed too hard at jokes that weren't funny, stayed loyal only as long as the checks cleared, and after discovering that his fiancée had been secretly negotiating a payout before their wedding and his closest business partner had been leaking information to competitors, Adrian decided he needed to disappear to find an answer no contract could guarantee. Who would show kindness when there was nothing to gain? The ICU became his hiding place, and the staff became unwilling participants in his test of humanity, most of them efficient, polite, distant, doing their jobs with routine professionalism, adjusting IVs, checking vitals, speaking about him as if he were furniture, until Nurse Maya Thompson walked into his room. On the 17th day, carrying a chart and a presence that felt different immediately, not dramatic or overly warm, just quietly attentive, as if she noticed details others missed, like the way his breathing subtly changed when voices got loud, or how his fingers twitched slightly when the room grew cold. She spoke to him while she worked, not because she expected a response, but because she believed patients deserved dignity whether they could hear or not, explaining every step, apologizing when procedures might cause discomfort, telling him the time of day, the weather outside, and for reasons Adrian couldn't explain, those small gestures unsettled him more than all the betrayals he had endured, because they were real and unguarded. Days passed and Maya continued caring for him, and slowly her words shifted from professional narration to fragments of her own life, stories she shared into the quiet like offerings, about growing up in a small town where everyone knew your business, about choosing nursing after watching her father die in a hospital bed surrounded by machines and strangers, about believing that compassion was a responsibility, not a personality trait. And Adrian listened, absorbing every word, feeling the walls he'd built over decades begin to crack in ways he couldn't control. At night, when the hospital dimmed and the city outside glowed with distant ambition, Maya sometimes sat beside his bed longer than required, her voice softer, more human, and one evening she laughed quietly as she told him how her friend said it was strange she talked to coma patients, how they joked that it was a waste of energy, and she responded, "Maybe, but I'd rather waste kindness than withhold it." And that sentence echoed in Adrian's mind long after she left, because it challenged everything he thought he knew about value and return. The turning point came on a stormy night when the hospital was understaffed and the rain battered the windows like it was trying to get inside. When Maya entered his room long after her shift should have ended, closed the door gently, and sat down with a heaviness in her posture that made Adrian tense beneath the stillness he maintained so carefully, and she spoke not as a nurse but as a woman at her breaking point, confessing to him because she believed he could not judge her, could not repeat her words, could not use them against her, telling him how her younger sister needed surgery they couldn't afford, how debt was swallowing her paycheck faster than she could earn it, how a wealthy patient's family had offered her money for confidential information earlier that week, and how for the first time in her life she had hesitated before saying no. Her voice cracked as she admitted how tired she was of being strong, of doing the right thing when no one seemed to notice, of believing that integrity mattered in a world that rewarded shortcuts. And then she whispered something that shattered Adrian completely, saying that sometimes she talked to him because he felt like proof that kindness could exist without applause, because even if he never woke up, at least she could say she treated someone with humanity when they had nothing to offer her in return. When she fell silent, wiping away tears and apologizing to an unconscious man for burdening him with her truth, Adrian felt something shift irreversibly inside him, because for the first time since he was a broke teenager hustling to survive, he felt ashamed, not of failure, but of abundance, of how much power he had hoarded while people like Maya carried the weight of the world quietly. He ended the experiment the next morning, letting his fingers move, his eyes open, sending doctors into urgent disbelief as the coma patient began to wake, but he waited until Maya returned before fully revealing himself, watching her freeze when she saw his gaze following her, her shock turning to tears when he softly thanked her by name and told her he Heard everything, not with accusation or pity, but gratitude. The truth unraveled quickly after that, his real identity, his wealth, the deliberate deception, and instead of anger, Maya felt something closer to understanding, because Adrian explained that he didn't fake the coma to trick people, but to find truth, to see who people were when power was stripped away, and her confession became the answer he never expected. In the weeks that followed, the world learned Adrian Cross was alive, but they didn't learn how he had changed, how he quietly paid for Maya's sister's surgery through an anonymous foundation, how he restructured his company's healthcare benefits after seeing the system from the inside, how he started visiting hospitals not for publicity but to listen, truly listen, to voices that were usually ignored, and how the richest thing he gained from losing everything was perspective. This story isn't just about a millionaire and a nurse, it's about what happens when we think no one is watching and choose kindness anyway. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that humanity still matters more than status or wealth, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, because the stories we share here aren't just entertainment, they're reminders of who we can be, and the next one might stay with you longer than you expect.